Hi there, my name is Gavin Walsh and I've spent the last 12 and a half years writing a trilogy of books called Shamrock 165 under the pseudonym of Gawain Kimrick. Each of them there are three individual books within it, three individual volumes called The Unknown Crash, Decision over Dalgleshire and Thy Will Be Done. And 12 and a half years ago I set out to tell the story of the Irish nation's first ever aviation disaster, which had never been told before, which also coincides with Aer Lingus' first disaster. No big surprise there, as they're our national carrier and having been formed in 1936, so it was their first disaster at the same time, their first fatal air crash in their 16th year of operation, which was unheard of to have such a safety record in those days. When I started out looking to tell the story of all of the 23 people's lives that were lost and tracking down their families, and there were a lot of fascinating characters, as would be expected, because only people that could afford to fly back then flew. Among them, they included several business people, several very wealthy business people of the era, medical professionals, and an atomic scientist who leaves nothing to the imagination in terms of his antics and his travels abroad at the peak of the Cold War. Now, when he was killed in our crash, that was entirely coincidental to whatever he had been at in Europe. This was supplementary to he was going to visit his ancestral home in Mung, County Leitrim, which is at the bottom of Shamrock Hill, where his father had left from about 70 years before. The crash was in January 1952 on a horrible stormy winter's night, and it brought down an airliner called the St. Kevin and almost brought down an airliner called the St. Coleman, which narrowly avoided catastrophe. Over the course of my investigations, I was always perturbed by a lot of the math and physics that simply did not stack up. A lot of things just made no sense. You know, if you take time, distance and speed as a triangular formula and you start playing with the vertices, none of them really made sense. They would go like jelly in your hand. In any event, I was eventually shown some highly secretive documents that should never have seen the light of day, and indeed never did, but I was given them under a special privilege, and finally everything started to come together. And the gist of it all is that both the investigative procedure and the inquiry built on this and the findings of the inquiry were nothing more and nothing less than an entire sham. And basically it was about protecting a shortcut that Aer Lingus were then taking at that time across the mountains in Snowdonia. And it was known for 3 or 4 years beforehand that there was a risk involved if all of the wrong factors came together at the right time, that an airplane could be in very serious difficulty. And of course, as we know, this came to pass on Thursday, January 10th, 1952, and 26 minutes later it almost happened a second airliner in an almost similar spot in the same mountain range. Over the years I've interviewed hundreds. In fact, I've interviewed about 1,450 people, some of them multiple times, to see how was their memory, had a memory sort of overrun or memory relapse. And the story I came up with matches pretty much all of the records that were suppressed at that time. Indeed, all of the witness statements were suppressed, and none of them made it to the inquiry. Basically, Captain Cuhan, who was the commander of the flight of the airliner, the St. Kevin, was deemed as being off course to the tune of 20 miles. And this off course literally bought the airline saving grace, in that they would not go down for the crash in terms of the unsafe flying airway that they were on. And in actual fact, it wasn't an airway, it was an off airway, and hence what made it so conscientious at that time. It was basically 149 mile of a straight run to save gas, to save aviation fuel, to save time, to save money, to save wear and tear on the engines, and the pilots were encouraged to take this shortcut. And Volume 3, which is Thy Will Be Done, which is already printed and ready for public publication, details all of the true causal factors of the crash, and it differs. It's diametrically opposed from what the investigation at the time found, and it's due for release very soon. I'll keep you posted on the next video. Okay, cheers.